rulership and princes-ship among the Arabs. When talking about the Arabs before Islam, we deem it necessary to draw a mini picture of the history of rulership, princes-ship, sectarianism, and the religious dominations of the Arabs, so as to facilitate the understanding of the emergent circumstances when Islam appeared. When the sun of Islam rose, rulers of Arabia were of two kinds: crowned kings, who were in fact not independent, and heads of tribes and clans who enjoyed the same authorities and privileges possessed by crowned kings, and were mostly independent, though some of them could have shown some kind of submission to a crowned king. The crowned kings were only those of Yemen, Hira, and Ghassan. All other rulers of Arabia were non-crowned. Rulership in Yemen. The folks of Sheba were one of the oldest nations of the pure Arabs who lived in Yemen. Excavations at or brought to light their existence 25 centuries BC. Their civilization flourished and their domain spread 11 centuries BC. It is possible to divide their ages according to the following estimation. The centuries before 650 BC, during which their kings were called Makrib Sheba. Their capital was Sarwa, also known as Kriba, whose ruins lie in a spot a day's walk from the western side of Marib. During this period they started building the dam of Marib, which had great importance in the history of Yemen. Sheba was also said to have had so great a domain that they had colonies inside and outside of Arabia. From 650 BC until 115 BC, during this era, they gave up the name Makrib and assumed the designation of kings of Sheba. They also made Makrib their capital instead of Sarwar. The ruins of Marib lie at a distance of 60 miles east of Sinai, from 115 BC until 300 AD. During this period, the tribe of Himyar conquered the kingdom of Sheba and took Redan for capital instead of Mari. Later on, Redan was called Zifar. Its ruins still lie on Mudawar mountain, near the town of Yarim. During this period, they began to decline and fall. Their trade failed to a very great extent. Firstly, because of Nabatean domain over the north of Hijaz. Secondly, because of the Roman superiority over the naval trade. Routes after the Roman conquest of Egypt, Syria and the north of Hijaz, and thirdly, because of the inter-tribal warfare. Thanks to the three above-mentioned factors, families in Qatar were disunited and scattered out from 300 AD until Islam dawned on Yemen. This period witnessed a lot of disorder and turmoil. The great many and civil wars rendered the people of Yemen liable to foreign subjection, and hence loss of independence. During this era, the Romans conquered Aden and even helped the Abyssinians Ethiopians to occupy Yemen for the first time in 340 AD, making use of the constant intertribal conflict of Hamdan and Himyar. The Abyssinian Ethiopian occupation of Yemen lasted until 378 AD, whereafter Yemen regained its independence Later on, cracks began to show in Marib Dam, which led to the Great Flood, 450 or 451 AD, mentioned in the Noble Quran. This was a great event which caused the fall of the entire Yemeni civilization and the dispersal of the nations living therein. In 523, Nawas, a Jew, dispatched a great campaign against the Christians of Najran in order to force them to convert into Judaism. Having refused to do so, they were thrown alive into a big ditch where a great fire had been set. The Quran referred to this event. Cursed were the people of the ditch. This aroused great wrath among the Christians, and especially the Roman emperors, who not only instigated the Abyssinians, Ethiopians against Arabs, but also assembled a large fleet which helped the Abyssinian-Ethiopian army of 70,000 warriors to effect a second conquest of Yemen in 525 AD under the leadership of Ariat, who was granted rulership over Yemen, a position he held until he was assassinated by one of his army leaders, Abraham, who, after reconciliation with the king of Abyssinia, took rulership over Yemen, and later on deployed his soldiers to demolish Al-Kaaba, and hence he and his soldiers came to be known as the Men of the Elephant. After the elephant incident, the people of Yemen, under the leadership of Karim bin Saif, and through Persian assistance, revolted against the Abyssinian Ethiopian invaders, restored independence, and appointed Karim as their king. However, was assassinated by an Abyssinian Ethiopian. He used to have him around for service and protection. The family of Yazid was thus deprived of royalty forever. Kisra, the Persian king, appointed a Persian ruler over Sana'a and thus made Yemen a Persian colony. Persian rulers maintained rulership of Yemen until Badan, the last of them, embraced Islam in 638 AD, thus terminating the Persian domain over Yemen. Rulership in Hira. Ever since Korosh the Great united the Persians, they ruled Iraq and its neighborhood. Nobody could shake off their authority until Alexander the Great vanquished their king Dara I and thus subdued the Persians in 326 BC. Persian lands were thenceforth divided and ruled by kings known as the kings of sects, an era which lasted until 230 AD. Meanwhile, the Carthaginians occupied some Iraqi territories and were later followed by some Atenanians, who managed to share some parts of Mesopotamia with them. The Persians, under the leadership of Ardashir, who had established the Sasanian state in 226 AD, regained enough unity and power to subdue the Arabs living in the vicinity of their kingdom, and forced Qudar to leave for Syria, leaving the people of Hira and Anbar under the Persian domain. During the time of Ardashir, Juzayma al-Wada exercised rulership over Hira, Rabia and Buddha, and Mesopotamia, and reckoned that it was impossible for him to rule the Arabs directly and prevent them from attacking his borders unless he appointed as king one of them who enjoyed support and power of his tribe. He had also seen that he could make use of them against the Byzantine kings, who always used to harass him. At the same time, the Arabs of Iraq could face the Arabs of Syria, who were in the hold of Byzantine kings. However, he deemed it fit to keep a Persian battalion under command of the king of Hira, to be used against those Arabs who might rebel against him. After the death of Juzayma, around 268 AD, was appointed as king by the Persian king. Sabur was the first of the Lakhmi kings who ruled Hira until the Persians appointed Kabas, in whose reign appeared someone called Mazdak, who called for this disoluteness in social life, and many of his subjects embraced Mazdak's religion, and even called upon the king of Hira to follow after. When the latter, because of his pride and his self-respect, rejected their orders, Kabak discharged him and nominated Hira, who had accepted the Mazdaki doctrine. No sooner did Kisra succeed Kabas than he, due to hatred of Mazdak's philosophy, killed Mazdak and many of his followers, restored Munzir to the throne of Hira, and gave orders to summon under arrest Hirath, who sought refuge with Al-Khan, tribe where he spent the rest of his life, sons of Al-Munzir. Kingship. A long time until An took over, because of a calumny borne by Zayd. The Persian king got angry with An and summoned him to his palace. An went secretly to Hani, chief of Shayban tribe, and left his wealth and family under the latter's protection, and then presented himself before the Persian king, who immediately threw him into prison, where he perished. Kisra then appointed Ayas was ordered to tell Hani to deliver and charge up to Kisra. No sooner than he had the Persian king received the fanatically motivated rejection on the part of the Arab chief. He declared war against the tribe of Shayban and mobilized his troops and warriors under the leadership of King Ayas to a place called Di-Kar, which witnessed a most furious battle wherein the Persians were severely routed by the Arabs for the first time in history. That was very soon after the birth of Prophet Muhammad, 8 months after Ayas bin Qubaisa's rise to power over Hira. After Ayas, a Persian ruler was appointed over Hira, but in 632 AD, the authority there returned to the family of Lukum, when Al-Munzir